We are now excited to present to you Reverend Helen Holbrook, a spiritual care provider who will be presenting on spirituality from an interfaith perspective. So, welcome, and we are so excited to hear from you. I'll pass over the mic.
Hello, my name is Helen Holbrook, and I'll be presenting Spirituality, Our Companion. I have over about 20 years' experience in spiritual care, and I also have had family members who have had to experience, as well as friends who have also had cancer over their lifetime. So I'll go to the next slide, please. Of course, we have to do the presenter's disclosure. It's me, Helen, and there's no relationship with a financial sponsor. I am not going to be rich from this. So the next slide, please. And there's no bias. And the next slide, please. And of course, we do have an equity commitment. We just have to post this on. And after the equity commitment, can we have the next slide, please? This is our learning objectives, how our cancer diagnosis can lead to asking core life questions on meaning and mortality, and how it's linked to our second stage of life. And it doesn't matter how old you are, there's similar questions about meaning and how we can enter into darker days, as well as how we have to hopefully develop tools in terms of the unknown. I'll have the next slide, please. Now that's my drawing. I did the best that I could. Anyway, this is kind of representation. Actually, it's a common imagery that you will see in various cultures. This swirling circle. It kind of is a demonstration of our movement, of our making meaning, where we go back and forth, and where we're heading towards and desire to connect to is love, or as some people would call a higher power, also the love that surrounds us to help us to make meaning. It is a movement between hope and discouragement, something that we do all our life. But when we get a diagnosis, we gravitate more back and forth, and that's okay because that is part of what our life event is and how we go through life. We can all remember instances in our own lifetime, whether young or a teenager or whatnot, where we've had, a crisis of some sort that challenges us, and may move to discouragement, but then we are pulled upwards through some form, depending upon our personality and the tools in life that we have created for ourselves. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of different circumstances around the cancer diagnosis. Are you a parent? Is it a child, a spouse, a grandparent, a sibling, a friend? There are so many things that can affect, but in essence, it affects how we see that cancer. For example, if one is a parent, there may be other challenges of parenting, especially when there is treatment. Or if you're a grandparent, there you still may want to explain what's going on to the grandchild. And sometimes people protect, like a child may protect the parent and may not share what they're going through, or same with a spouse or a sibling or a friend. We all have different roles, but in essence, it does present a crisis in identity. Like for example, my mom, who had her cancer diagnosis, the first one, in when she was 65, her identity as being one who provided hospitality to her friends, that was so core. Mom was quite famous for her baking, and so that is one thing she continued to carry on until she just wasn't up to it, and not until and because she had cancer of the kidney. She was quite weak, and it was hard for her not to be the one cooking and to actually have to rely on her children to provide soup and whatnot for things that she could eat. So that was really hard in terms of her identity. But when she did get the cancer treatment and she got better, boy, did she cook. Sort of like to, and invited people over because that was core to who she was. Next slide, please. And again, the type of cancer. As we know, historically, various forms of cancer are treatable, and but others may be more challenging. A family history. I have encountered with patients people who have said and have had a long list of family members who have died of cancer, who have had to struggle with cancer. And that could be a heavy burden in the sense of, or it could also be an opportunity because how those family members dealt with the cancer diagnosis and can be a model as well as possibly a place of fear. Your income level. Uh, particularly if you have cancer and you're trying to bring in an income friend for a family or even for yourself, that can be another stressor. um, when I was in my studies in chaplaincy, I did a paper on people who had been challenged with AIDS in the 80s and how that income level really affected because there was a comparison between the United States and Canada, and because you don't have socialized medicine, that really affected how the someone struggled with eggs and had affected the health overall of that person because of the stresses of income, as opposed to someone in Canada who has had the AIDS diagnosis and a lot of the things were covered, but not everything is covered, of course. If someone has children, a lot of there's a lot more pressure on the family income as well. And of course, culture, where we are, and the cultural beliefs about illness can differ from one group to another. Um, so there's a lot more around that can affect how one views that cancer diagnosis and experiences it. Next slide, please. Um, Again, the age, child, teenager, young adult, middle age, senior. And this goes into your developmental stage in terms of what your expectations of life is. I mean, I've had friends who, and I've met people who are young adults. So it's a can be a period where people may mourn or fear what will happen, and the first time someone has had to deal with their own mortality. Or middle aged again, thinking about one's future, or a senior who may, as my mom was in her second diagnosis, who was more at peace that this might be a possibility, that may think of what kind of treatments she was willing to go into for her esophageal cancer, where she ruled out surgery. And she says, "No, I'm 85 now. This is not something I want to do." As opposed to one of my friends, her brother had esophageal cancer, and he was in his late 30s, and he had two school age children, and he went for the surgery for the same thing. So there's a lot of things can affect all of these decisions. Next slide, please. Um, Erickson was, when we're talking about where we are in our life when we get that diagnosis, and of course, Erickson was one of the core initiators in terms of looking at life in terms of developmental stages. And at each stage, we encounter different things. As you know, when you're a young adult, you're looking at affirming your identity, what career to take, and if you're going to have a family or not, or all of those kind of things. And then of course in the middle, your time to begin to look back on your life. And but however, um, it's not neat because sometimes when there is a health crisis, people stop and may look at the questions at later in life in terms of what's happening in my life. Have I, I visit people because I work casual at St. B and of course many years. Being in the hospital itself can actually start that conversation. Is this who I want to be? Is this what I want to do? Um, what are my relationships like with my loved ones? Should I prepare? It can be a big health crisis, like a heart attack, even, or your first other chronic illnesses like dialysis. And people will ask, should I prepare a will? And sometimes when people start to say those things, it can be upsetting to the caregivers who said, no, 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 you're going to beat this. No, no, don't think about that. It can be a bit of a shock, but it's okay. I remember my mom, when she was 65 with her first diagnosis, she did actually do those things, even though um, uh, it's a good recovery rate when you do have cancer of the kidney. She just felt that she had to do that. It didn't mean that she was giving up. It was just that she was thinking of those things, as many people do sometimes in their 70s and 80s, of doing a will. In fact, many feel that you should actually do it at any time of your life. Um, so she started to do that, and she was thinking of the, where do I want to be buried and all of that. And it didn't mean she gave up, but she also had those questions about what do I want to do? And interesting because she had to have a lot of blood transfusions, and she she did. And one thing that came up, I always wanted to go to Quebec City, and so that was one of her goals after that. So those are the kind of questions that you ask. Next slide, please. During the period, people will reflect on life that they have lived and come away with either a sense of fulfillment from life or lived a sense of regret and despair over life misspent. I think one of the most common things, doesn't matter, what, that you could have a good recovery that will happen after your crisis diagnosis, but it's not unusual. A lot of people focus on their relationship, or some people are start to have discussions. Well, is there something else out there? They may want to know and reflect upon spiritual things and may start reading in that area or seeking out. Um, do I want to go to a ritual or something like that? And most common is reconciliation. I've been with many people who haven't spoken to a brother or sister or a parent or grandparent, and they decide I like to make peace with that person. And then, so that is the kind of questions or reflections they may have. And also I remember after my mom's cancer diagnosis and her recovery, and she was didn't even need any treatments after the first cancer diagnosis, after the kidney was removed. She all of a sudden said, I've got to have dessert more often. So for her, she always was watching whether she eats dessert or not, and she just decided, it's okay to make dessert once in a while. So that was her big thing. To her, she was felt that she was that would be a thing to fulfill her. Uh, but that was one thing she discovered. Next slide, please. So, and Richard Rohr is a survivor of a cancer survivor, and actually he just got a recent diagnosis again. And so he is a founder of the Center of Action and Contemplation, and he's written many books in regards to what kind of questions and reflections we may go into when we're either at the second half of life, which starts between 35 to 100 basically, or when there's a crisis, and he himself has gone through a health crisis many times before. Next slide, please. Uh, he he challenges us in his book. Oh yes, that's one of his books. Is called Falling Upwards, And so I read that book as well. It kind of challenges you when you have those questions. Sometimes you go in between. As remember that little diagram I gave you back and forth. Next slide, please. That's a picture of a bicycle sign in Wales. Anyhow, kind of the first stage of life, you learned your boundaries, your codes of behavior, your personal identity, and the seeking of security. So when you get a crisis, oh my goodness, how does it affect who I am, as I gave you as an example before? And the world isn't safe anymore. My world has crashed down. It's not safe. And these are quite a shock. And where do I get the answer? And who will listen to me as I come to terms with all of this? Next slide, please. The second stage is we're trying to find out who the true self. We're looking into the mirror and we may see the cracks. We have to forgive ourselves. Sometimes it's the shadow side. We may see those parts of us. We have more time to think, maybe. Um, those kind of things. Next slide, please. So lots of questions may happen. And so if we try and do this all by ourselves, it can be hard. We may ask, what is my purpose? You might taking risks. Some of them are healthy risks. Like maybe if you are an introvert, you may start to go to something that revolves a lot of a group. You end up opposite to where you start. For example, the extrovert movement. You may have a more holistic point of view. Um, and you're letting go, as many may think, that things may not seem so important anymore, whether the toothpaste has the right container or those kind of things. The small stuff, as they say, is not so big. Next, please. And the questions that may come. Why did this happen? I should have. If only. Sometimes we can be very critical, as Brene Brown often uses that term, the critical voice in our head. That sometimes I should have lived this, I should have done that. Maybe if I did this, then this wouldn't have happened. These questions go on in our head when really part of the journey, although these are healthy questions to have, is to move from there to acceptance of where we are right now and to, well, what do I want to do now? What is meaningful me to now? What kind of relationships can I have now? What kind of changes can I make with my life now? And they should be step by step kind of things, if that is what you want to do. And the other one, what is my legacy? Some people may start looking into the past and family trees and maybe journaling or writing letters or whatnot. What would I like to do? Some people may start to travel or maybe take on more walking or all kinds of things that they'd like to do, with limits, of course, in terms of what their physical health is like. Or do you want to connect with friends more? Or so these are lots of different questions that may come up. Next, please. And sometimes on a spiritual level, uh, uh, people can be very hard on themselves. So many times I actually have heard people, well, I've done something wrong, so this is why this is happening to me. Someone's trying to make sense. And it's more or less, it can be very hard. You're trying to make sense. Well, why? And it's okay to ask the questions, but the movement, if we continue, as I had the initial diagram that I said in green, if you continue on and you go down and down and down, then it just can affect your health outcomes. And at that point, you may get stuck. And so you may need to talk to a counselor about some of these feelings that have dragged you down, where your whole mind is into self-criticism, which is not healthy. And so it is important for you to talk about those things, because it is something that can happen. And sometimes it might be a result of some of the medications that you're on or other things There's so many other contributing factors, but the key thing is remember to be gentle. And one question I always ask people, if you were your own parent, would you be saying these things to you? You know, you would be supportive. You have that inner wisdom to slowly build yourself up again. So, a terminal insert can trigger, as I said, the second half of life. It can be a challenge to have one consistent listener. So, those who are supporters, you may need to have more than one. The pain of reflecting on our shadow side can be very difficult. And again, you may consider counseling or whoever is in your area. Again, I don't know where you're from. And that you can get that effective listener and supporter in your life. The thing is that someone to tell you what to do is not what you need. You have the answers within you through reflection. And next slide, please. And there are books and things that may help you on that journey as well. And there it is back again, the movement of meaning making between hope and discouragement. You go back and forth. The what ifs, if this treatment doesn't work, my mother in the first cancer realized, and she did try with the esophageal. And at some point, there was just the decision had to be made on her. She made of not taking any more treatment. But then the hope that she kept on happening when we had that conversation, wait a minute, I want to go to Quebec City. And that was her hope. And I hear so many people go back and forth with that. So this is a nice, simple image that we can see, and it's part of everyone's experience here on Earth. Uh, Next slide, please. There are many tools we can say. One of the neat ritual, of course, of cancer care is to ring that bell after your course. You can actually create ritual anytime you want, whether it's the beginning of your treatment. You can create a ritual. Some people don't realize it. They may want to have a lunch or may want to sit and reflect on the trees with family or share some of their concerns with friends. You can create whatever those symbols that you would like. So it might be lighting a candle before every time you have a treatment. And so there are many things. Actually went to a ritual workshop, and there are so many things we can do. You don't realize how much ritual does go on around you. But don't think because it's not in a formal institution that you can't do ritual. Anyone can do ritual, and we do many times. Next slide. Listening for the caregivers to listen, but make sure that you take care of yourself and find someone to listen as well. Having someone listen to you reflectively. And again, just to hear what you are saying. And one thing about being listened to, we all know what it's like to be listened, to be heard, and not lectured to or judged when we share our story. Next slide, please. Other tools, walking, meditation, mindful photography, and online support. Um, for example, my mom, one of her friends in her 40s and 50s also was getting cancer treatment. So the group of them decided to go for, because she lived in the Cinnabon Park area, they used to go for a weekly walk just to go through the English gardens and just to walk. And that was a sense of support that that person felt that they had that support from love. So sometimes it's the most simple things. Meditation. Every 8 weeks I get an injection in my eye at the eye doctor, and oh, I am afraid nobody likes to get something injected in their eye. So I will do meditation before. I also did that before an eye surgery. Mindful photography, that is so easy. We have cameras, and it's very simply put. You take pictures, um, things that not with your mind, but with your heart, wherever your spirit draws you, and you take an image and you reflect on what was it in that image that actually struck you and what attracted you. And the more challenging thing is to take pictures of images that irritate you or you're not too attracted to, and reflect upon what was it in the image that connected with you that you didn't like. And sometimes that's something that you are struggling with at the time. The St. Boniface Hospital asked all its employees to take pictures, and it's right in their gallery now of images all throughout the hospital. And I think that really was a spiritual exercise for the staff so they could do something that was spiritual on a deeper level in terms of what was it that attracted them? Why were they taking pictures of so many different things? Of different uh, things along the way. Could be a stethoscope or all kinds of things. And of course, online support. It is remarkable how much is done. Actually, I have a meditation group that meets online. Couple of the people are receiving some cancer treatments, and so they need that extra protection and can't gather. And so the community just decided, you know what, we'll do it for them. We'll have an online meditation session. Next line, please. A slide. All right. Our other tools, feelings and naming them. Uh, there's a lot in terms of when we don't name something, it just goes and stays there. And remember, your feelings come out in your senses. So, for example, if something is not being revealed or shared, everyone will feel it in different areas, whether it's in some people when we get more headaches, some will get backaches, some stomach aches. Your body is telling you something needs to be shared, or something that is happening is not going well in your life in terms of a relationship. More simply, if somebody's in an unhealthy relationship, I was just talking to somebody recently. It was their stomach. Oh, they felt awful and they couldn't eat because right now in their life they knew this relationship was not healthy for them, and they kept on hanging on. And so the stomach was yelling, saying, "Stop this." So I'm sick of this, right? The nausea, the churning, those are the feelings running around. And when she shared those things, she realized when I said, "When you share those things with me, how does that feel?" And when she, next time she connected with that person and she shared, that the relationship had to end, she had no more stomach problems. So, that's a good thing. When you're going through the cancer treatments, um, there are always, as we say, turkeys in your life. It doesn't matter who you are. Stay away from the turkeys when you're got your bad day. It just happened. It's just a reality. So that you'd have to be gentle with yourself and take care of yourself on the days when it's not a right day to talk to a certain person. And next slide, please. So my take-home messages, I'm almost done, are be aware of your second half journey and the questions it's bring. Know that it's normal. Know that it doesn't mean some people fear, well, oh my goodness, does this mean it's the end? No, they're quite healthy questions. Anytime you have a crisis, I mean, anytime I've seen anyone in a hospital for any reason, sometimes they have time to reflect and they ask those questions. Make sure that you share them with someone that you consider to be safe, a safe place, someone you can trust. You don't have to share those questions with everybody. Sometimes family members just if you mean, it depends on the family member. Sometimes you just need to talk to somebody outside the family unit because it's safer or because you're just going through a lot of things. All right. And the next one. And your next, I think it was another one, you can use a lot of the things that you have and had in your life to use as tools while you're doing it. My mom used to crochet little squares and send them to the Winnipeg Humane Society so the dogs would have blankets. That was her thing. They were just small little projects for her. So, and also be aware of those around you. Sometimes it is surprising to discover when you share what you're going through, how much support, just like my mom and her friends who used to go walking with her. And that's not something that costs a lot of money. And next, since we need to have our questions, I always say when you have a presentation, you gotta leave the dog pictures. So thank you and take care on your journey. And may you feel that you're companioned, and those who are doing the companioning, they feel that they are being companioned. Thank you very much.
I just would like to thank you one more time from the Cancer Care team and on behalf of the patients and families tuning in.